The world has long been captivated by the tragic tale of Bobbi Kristina Brown, the daughter of the legendary Whitney Houston. Growing up in the spotlight, Bobbi Kristina's life seemed to mirror that of her mother, filled with moments of fame, love, and loss, yet marred by addiction, dysfunction, and ultimately, a heartbreaking fate. While Whitney Houston was an iconic figure, her daughter's journey serves as a stark reminder of the dangers that come with fame and the emotional and psychological toll that public life can exact on individuals, especially when the shadows of their parents loom large. A promise to be her own person. From an early age, Bobbi Kristina Brown made it clear that she wasn't just going to be known as Whitney's daughter. She wanted to carve out her own identity, separate from her mother's fame. "I just want to sing my baby, my baby, my baby," Whitney Houston once said, affirming her deep love for her daughter. This statement spoke volumes about the bond between them, but it also set the stage for the immense pressure Bobbi Kristina would face as the world scrutinized her every move. Whitney, the iconic pop star, was not just a mother, she was a legend, and Bobbi Kristina's life was forever intertwined with that legacy. The day Whitney was gone. On February 11, 2012, the world was rocked by the news of Whitney Houston's death at the age of 48. Found unresponsive in a hotel bathtub, her death was a tragic echo of her own struggles with addiction. For Bobbi Kristina, it wasn't just the loss of a mother, it was the beginning of a downward spiral that would mirror the tumultuous life of the woman who gave her life. In a haunting twist, Bobbi Kristina would later be found in a similar state, submerged in a tub of water, her life tragically ending much too soon. It's as if fate had decided to bring her story full circle in the most tragic way imaginable. A family defined by chaos. Whitney Houston's life was filled with highs and lows, with moments of superstardom followed by periods of personal crisis. For Bobbi Kristina, growing up in such an environment meant constantly navigating a world of instability. From her mother's struggles with addiction to her father Bobby Brown's erratic behavior, Bobbi Kristina was no stranger to chaos. She was raised in a household where arguments, drug use, and emotional instability were all too familiar. And as much as her parents tried to shield her, it was impossible to protect her from the turmoil that unfolded behind closed doors. It was no surprise that she grew up fast, learning to cope with things no child should ever have to witness. The Being Bobbi Brown years, fame, dysfunction, and reality TV. In 2005, the world got a glimpse into the chaotic lives of Whitney and Bobbi through their reality TV show, Being Bobbi Brown. While intended to give fans a behind-the-scenes look at the couple's life, the show quickly devolved into a spectacle of dysfunction. For Bobbi Kristina, this public airing of her family's dirty laundry was more than just uncomfortable, it was invasive. The show captured screaming matches, erratic behavior, and the emotional toll that this life took on her. What was meant to be entertainment became an exploitative look at a family in crisis. The damage done to Bobbi Kristina's mental and emotional well-being was immeasurable. A child caught in the middle. Bobbi Kristina's life was a constant balancing act, caught between the pressures of living in the shadow of her famous mother and the desire to lead a life of her own. As a child, she was forced to defend her parents to her peers, often facing ridicule and mockery due to the media's portrayal of her family. She found herself in the middle of a storm, torn between the need to protect her mother from public criticism and the reality of the dysfunction that surrounded her. At school, she was forced to confront the reality of her family's struggles, and as much as she tried to shield herself from the outside world, the truth always found its way in. The destructive cycle of addiction. As Bobbi Kristina grew older, it became increasingly clear that the dysfunction of her early years had left deep scars. By the time she was a teenager, she was already struggling with addiction. The same drugs that had consumed her mother's life were now taking their toll on Bobbi Kristina. It was reported that by the time she was 14, she had already experimented with drugs, including marijuana, alcohol, and cocaine. Whitney, too, had taken Bobbi Kristina to rehab several times, and despite her best efforts to get clean, it was clear that both mother and daughter were battling similar demons. A dysfunctional relationship with Nick Gordon, One of the most controversial aspects of Bobbi Kristina's life was her relationship with Nick Gordon, a family friend who had been part of Bobbi Kristina's life since she was a child. Nick became an increasingly significant figure in her world as she grew older. Though initially considered a surrogate brother, the dynamic between them shifted in troubling ways. Nick Gordon, who had been living with Whitney and Bobbi Kristina since he was 16, later became Bobbi Kristina's boyfriend, a relationship that was met with shock by her family and the public. While Nick claimed that Whitney had approved of their romantic relationship, many questioned his true intentions, particularly given the financial windfall that would come with being close to Bobbi Kristina. The last days, a glimmer of hope before tragedy struck. As Bobbi Kristina approached adulthood, she seemed to be on the cusp of a fresh start. She had plans to move to Los Angeles, closer to her father, Bobbi Brown, and was determined to take control of her own life. In her last tweets, she expressed a desire to begin anew and to leave the past behind. But her attempt to break free from the toxic environment she had lived in for years was tragically cut short. Just days before she was set to leave, she was found unconscious in a bathtub, her body, like her mother's, submerged in water. The tragedy of her death was a painful reminder of the generational cycle of addiction, mental health struggles, and the immense pressures of living in the public eye. The mysterious circumstances of Bobbi Kristina's death. The circumstances surrounding Bobbi Kristina's death remain shrouded in mystery. While the official cause of death was ruled as an undetermined accident, many questions still linger. Was her death the result of a tragic accident, a suicide, or something far more sinister? There are suspicions about Nick Gordon's involvement in her death, particularly given his suspicious behavior in the days leading up to her passing. Despite the questions that remain, one thing is clear: Bobbi Kristina's death was the heartbreaking conclusion to a life that had been marked by tragedy, addiction, and an overwhelming desire to escape the shadow of her mother's fame. A legacy of pain and tragedy. Bobbi Kristina's life and death serve as a tragic reminder of the dark side of fame and the cost of living in the spotlight. While Whitney Houston's career will always be remembered as one of the most iconic in music history, the legacy she left for her daughter was one of addiction, heartbreak, and a desperate struggle for normalcy. Bobbi Kristina's story is not just a tale of fame and loss. It is a warning of the dangers that can come with being a child of celebrities, and the long-lasting effects of growing up in an unstable, tumultuous environment. The public's fascination with their lives only added to the weight they both carried, and in the end, it proved to be too much for Bobbi Kristina. As we reflect on Bobbi Kristina's life, we must remember her not just for the tragedy of her death, but for the promise she showed, a young woman who, despite everything, tried to overcome the odds and build a life of her own. It's a story that reminds us of the price of fame, the importance of mental health, and the need for compassion and understanding in the face of personal struggles. And for Bobbi Kristina, it's a legacy that will forever be intertwined with the haunting image of her mother's life and death. And there you have it, folks, the tragic tale of Bobbi Kristina Brown, a story that's both heartbreaking and a reminder that sometimes fame really isn't all it's cracked up to be. If you enjoyed this emotional roller coaster, make sure to hit that like button harder than a TMZ camera flash. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories that make you think, laugh, and maybe even shed a tear. Catch you next time, and remember, stay legendary, or at least stay out of bathtubs.